Hey, welcome to our weekly segment where we guide you on your journey to financial literacy.
We like to make these videos short and sweet in hopes that you learn a new economic term while keeping you updated on 3 financial events that happened in the past week.
Without further ado, let's get right into it. The post-GFC labor market recovery was prolonged and anemic amid shaken confidence and the persistence of weak economic conditions. As a result, it took about 6 years to return the unemployment rate to its pre-crisis level. In contrast now, a little over a year since the brief but deep pandemic-induced recession ended, there are signs of labor market tightness. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics released last week showed a record number of job openings, which are currently more than the number of unemployed. That said, there are still over 3 million people that have left the labor force since the pandemic started. With vaccines broadly available, schools reopening, and the enhanced unemployment benefits expiring in the fall, we think the labor force participation will recover and sizable jobs gains will spur a historically fast return to full employment. With the housing bubble bursting and banks tightening credit standards in 2008, consumers were forced to reduce new borrowing and, in some cases, defaulted on mortgages. Even after economic and credit conditions normalized, the scars of the recession led many to pay down debt, triggering a decade-long deleveraging cycle. Consequently, the household debt-to-income ratio declined and is now at the lowest level in 27 years. A healthy financial sector that stands ready to lend, and households with additional capacity to take on debt to support elevated consumption levels are all tailwinds that were not present in the last expansion. Unlike the 3 previous recessions that were triggered by financial imbalances, the 2020 recession and bear market were caused by a public health crisis, for which there is not much of a historical parallel. The unprecedented crisis brought about a faster and bigger monetary and fiscal response than in any previous recession. The Fed quickly used its lending powers, providing liquidity and funding to consumers and businesses, while growing its balance sheet by over $3 trillion over the course of 4 months. For comparison, a similar amount was added during the GFC, but it was added over the course of 4 years. At the same time, the government delivered almost $6 trillion of fiscal aid. With the Senate passing a new bipartisan infrastructure bill last week, and Democrats concurrently pursuing a larger $3.5 trillion reconciliation package focused on human infrastructure, government spending is likely to continue adding to GDP growth. As seen in the graph below, between 2010 and 2014, early in the cycle, government spending was a headwind to growth, declining almost 10%. Anyways, that pretty much wraps up the 3 news segments for this week. I hope you enjoyed watching, and now I'm going to hand it off to Om to discuss our financial term of this week.
Hey guys, for this week's financial term, we're going to be talking about the invisible hand, a very interesting concept in economics. The invisible hand is a metaphor for the unseen forces that affect a free market economy, such as America, of course. By consumers thinking about themselves and the freedom of consumption as well as production, the best interests of society are met. Well, that is the book definition of the invisible hand. Well, let's really think about it, right? A free market economy is based on us, the consumers. Whatever we want or demand is what producers strive to make. In a free market economy, of course. And then due to capitalism and competition, they fight to produce at the lowest price to grab market share, thus leaving the consumer with the best priced product. This is just one example of the invisible hand affecting our market. In general, our demands drive producers and consumers together drive the economy. Another good example of this are ride-sharing services. When a user opts to take a ride using a ride-sharing app, the invisible hand shows itself in the form of surge pricing. Prices on ride-sharing apps remain at low levels throughout the course of the day because the demand for rides from users is at near equilibrium to the supply of drivers. When the demand in a certain area becomes high, however, say maybe after a concert or at the airport, prices rise dramatically, which encourages more drivers to head to that area to again find an equilibrium and balance the supply. This interpretation of the invisible hand, the user decision to pay for a ride with a ride-sharing app, causes a greater benefit to the public because they are using their wealth to pay a driver, right? Another worker. And that income the driver earns is going to be paid to someone else. Let's say at a restaurant, at dinner, right? And that again, that cycle continues forward. So one man's income is another man's spending. And this process as a whole, this cycle, further advances society. The invisible hand is actually part of an economic theory called laissez-faire, which means let do or let go. In other words, the approach suggests that market will eventually find its equilibrium and that the government should stay out of it with either fiscal or monetary policy. Well, that's all for today, guys. If you liked the video, please drop a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe, as it really helps the channel grow. Thanks a lot, guys.